Okay. When did you first start to write crime novels?
I started when I was appointed by the BBC as the Home Affairs or crime correspondent. And I think prior to that, I probably always wanted to write, but never really had that moment, that catalyst to do so. And I was moved from covering the environment into covering crime.
Right.
And that gave me quite a fundamental dilemma, because I enjoyed doing the environment. And suddenly I was in this new world, and I felt almost like the new kid in class. You know, I'd moved to a new town, a new school. I didn't know anyone now, whereas before I knew everybody, and I knew what was going on. And that was a bit of a shock. And that then sort of translated itself to me into writing, because that's what happens to Dan in the books. He's moved from one field into another, into crime, and he struggles to cope with it too. And his solution is to shadow the police on a major investigation. He becomes close to the detectives and finds out he has a talent for solving crimes, and that's the genesis of the books. That's how they work. Okay,
so you didn't grow up with the aspect of becoming an author then?
No, not at all. No, I've been extremely lucky. My parents were newsagents. There was no real history of university in my family, but I was lucky that when I was at school, which is just an ordinary comprehensive school, a couple of very fine teachers encouraged me to go to university, and I did, and I picked up a life in the media from there at the university radio station. And from there, I found a love of writing, telling stories, and I think that's how I became a writer.
Yeah. How did you become involved with the BBC then? How did your career progress?
I was extremely lucky. You see so many people who spend years trying to get into the BBC or into being a broadcaster or a journalist, and they never do. I was lucky in that I became a disc jockey at university, and I enjoyed music and of course, the sound of my own voice, as you'll realise very well. And from there, I got a little bit bored with DJing, and I went into the radio newsroom. And then some jobs came up with the BBC, and I applied for one. And remarkably, they gave me a job, and they sent me on a training course and turned me into a TV reporter, and looked after me ever since, and for which I'm enormously grateful. They've looked after me really well, and they've given me a great life.
Yeah. So does being a crime correspondent feed ideas for the novels that you write?
Oh, yes. Very, very many.
Yeah.
Very many. It's extraordinary, the things you see out there, and the things that people do, the motives they have for the crimes they commit, the lives they lead, and the things they will do sometimes for their own gain, sometimes to protect or help other people, but just to achieve some form of justice occasionally in their eyes. And my time in the courts, my time working with detectives and criminals, it feeds in more ideas than I could ever possibly write about.
Do you use people you meet as loosely based characters in your books then?
Well, I have to be very careful with that, because there's a huge guessing game going on in the newsroom, because some of my scenes are based in the newsroom.
Okay.
And so people say to me, come on, which of the characters, which of the producers or editors or technical staff are based on real people? And I always keep stum. I say, I can't tell you. And I can honestly tell you that I don't steal one person to become one character, but I nick bits of people, whether it's a mannerism, whether it's a quirk of appearance or something they do. And I'll give you an instance. I've got a great friend from college days. He's a wonderful guy. He's charming, charismatic, handsome, talented, all that sort of stuff, which is really annoying to people like me because they're not so lucky. But he's got one bizarre mannerism, and it's this. In every time you take him out for a drink or go and have a coffee with him, he will get out of his pocket before he sits down all his change and make it a little pile on the table in front of him, for no other reason than it's what he's always done. And it really annoyed me, and so I gave that mannerism to a character in one of my books. Okay. And then when he read it, he phoned up and said, I suppose you'll think you're funny. So writing is a really good way to have revenge on people.